Yep.
Yes.
There we go. We got a good crowd.
Okay. We see quite a number of names. We'll wait maybe just
Hi,
a minute.
Gary.
Good morning.
I'm not sure I heard that, but if people were saying good morning back.
I said good morning. Jim Wexler.
Audrey, my volume's terrible. Oh, it's because I got it down to 2.
We could go around the list and you can choose another language and we can all speak that. All right, so I think in light of the crowd that has made it their business to be timely, we will start right in. We have a lot to cover. So I'm Guy Moss. I'm a member of the Newton Men's Club and a resident of Newton. Our host and administrator, whose face you may see, is Ilana Seidman. She is the director of programming for the Newton Senior Center. And my co-presenter is Gary Seligson of Cambridge, but also a member of the Newton Men's Club. So if Cambridge seems at all strange in association with Newton, know that number one, he was drafted. Number two, probably because he's witty, good looking and smart. And also because in light of the trivia nature of this program, you should all be aware that Newton was at one time part of Cambridge. And when it was incorporated in the 1600s, the first name of Newton was Cambridge Village, which didn't last long, but nonetheless, that was the first name. So this will be a quiz on the presidents and on aspects related to the presidency. We had a lot of choices for format, but what we elected to do in light of the Zoom presentation and the number of questions that we have, which is quite a bundle, we are going to do it as follows. Gary and I, switching between us, will ask the question, but at the same time, you will see it on the screen along with 4 to 5, roughly, multiple choice answers to choose from. And we will then wait a short period of time. We'll then give you the answer and we will comment as appropriate. Some of these don't warrant comments and other questions do, because that will make it more interesting, educational, and fun. We would ask generally that you hold your questions until the end, or comments or additional questions on the presidency that you may want to offer the group. Hold it until the end, simply because it will likely get unmanageable if we stop each time and extend one question into many minutes. And if we do that, we will lose quite a number of these questions, and we think they're quite a bit of fun for you to hear. If you feel that something has come up where we've given an incorrect answer, or you really have to comment, then Ilana, you may want to comment, but I would say raise your hand. Ilana will call on you, or send something to Ilana in the chat. Would that be the right phraseology, Ilana? Okay, so do it that way. Otherwise, we have from 9:30 until 11. And we'll try to leave time at the end. Obviously, we're playing this somewhat by ear. So let's start in that spirit. I would also say, oh, I meant to add this earlier. A question may be asked in the singular, such as what president did the following or got the following award. That does not necessarily mean the answer is limited to one. We didn't want to use plurals when there were more than one because that would give away the answer. If you see any of those, well, my mistake. But the singular doesn't mean the singular. The plural, I suppose, should say, doesn't mean the plural if there is one. So be aware of that.
We should also remind people that this is not a competition. We're not scoring it. You don't need to worry about how many right answers you got. We're not going to compare it with anyone else's score. You may want to keep your own score just to see how good you are, but some of these questions are pretty obscure. We wouldn't expect anyone to know the answers except someone who had deliberately sought out the question and done the research. But anyway, so it's not a competition, it's just fun. And again, maybe we'll have a time at the end for questions that you might have come up with. You might have some of your own trivia questions you'd like to add to the list. But we have quite a few to cover, and we hope you have a good time with them.
And also, if you find that there's something that warrants a question or comment later, just be aware they're all numbered. So if you have a pen and paper, just jot down the question because we could always go back to it. I've got it in front of me if we need to read it. So that'd be an easy way of doing it rather than just searching at the end. So let me start. Alana, put up the screen. The screen will be up throughout, and we'll start with number one. Which of the following presidents did not die in office? Garfield, Harding, Taylor, Tyler, Coolidge.
So how do we answer these?
You're just going to answer to yourself. That was Gary's point. If we try to do this on a competitive or interactive basis, or people yelling out, we felt it would get chaotic and be counterproductive. So again, people.
What if I die before I can answer it?
Then you will undoubtedly miss out on everything that follows, but we'll read it at your funeral.
And you're the one person who actually lost the competition in that case.
Okay. The answer to this one is Tyler and Coolidge. Taylor and Harding died in office. Garfield was assassinated. Okay, number two. How old must one be to become president? 25, 30, 35, 40. There is no age requirement.
Can we call it out?
You can't be electrocuted or shot by us, but I would say no. Again, there were choices we made. The problem with your calling it out is that someone may be thinking about it. Again,
So we're going to hold it to the end then. Is that correct?
yeah. If you have questions or comments, jot down the number of the question and
Okay.
we'll carry it to the end. So the answer here constitutionally is 35. Number three, how many electors are in the Electoral College? A number you were undoubtedly hit over the head with over the last few months. 100, 535, 270, 435, 538. And the answer here, and if I'm going too fast, you should yell out and let me know. Again, we have a lot of questions which we think you'll want us to read.
Well,
The answer is 5.
On some of the simple questions, we'll go through them faster, like this one. Some of the more complex ones will give you a little more time.
The answer is 538. The reason for that answer I'll hold off on because it ties into another question we'll come to shortly. Okay. Number 4. How many electoral votes did Massachusetts have in the 2020 election? 7, 9, 11, 13. And the answer is 11. This is a
0, 8, 2, 4.
This is an interesting area to comment briefly. The census is done every 10 years.
0, 8.
And I'm sorry. And under federal law, there's a reapportionment of the seats in the House, and that affects a state's electoral vote total. So Massachusetts, prior to the 2010 census, had 12 electoral votes, and because of shifting populations, we lost a seat, and we went down to 11 electoral votes. Again, if you want more on that, hold the question until the end. Okay, 4A. Which of the following elections did not result in an alternative election in the House of Representatives? 1800, 1812, 1824, 1876, and 2020 did not result. And here the answer is 1812, 1876, and 2020. In both, in 1800, Jefferson and Burr were tied, and the election went to the House. In 1824, there were multiple candidates, and John Quincy Adams, Jackson, and Henry Clay, and others did not result in a holder of a majority of electoral votes, and as a result, that election went to the House, and Adams won. Okay, number 5, which I'm going to go to 10 in case you were wondering when I'm going to shut up. Number 5, which of these have votes in the Electoral College? Washington, D.C., D.C. and Puerto Rico, D.C., Puerto Rico, and Guam, or none of the above because electoral votes are limited to the states. And the answer is Washington, D.C. This is a function of the 23rd Amendment. The District of Columbia was given the number of electoral votes equal to whatever state held the least number of electoral votes, which is 3. And so going back to the first question, or rather an earlier question, each state has electoral votes equal to its 2 senators plus its members of the House. So for Massachusetts, 2 plus 9 equals 11. So all the states' senators are 100. House of Representatives in Congress are 435. So 100, 435 is 535, plus the 3 from DC equal 538. And that was the answer we went over before. Okay, number 6. Who did not lose the popular vote when elected president? who did not lose? Trump, Hayes, Nixon, John Quincy Adams. And the answer here is Nixon. All the others did lose the popular vote, regardless of what later happened. Obviously, Trump lost, for example, and then won the presidency in 2016. Okay, number 7, next sheet. Okay, who lost his own state but won the election nevertheless? Trump, Wilson, Nixon, Truman, all of the above. And the answer here is Trump, Wilson, and Nixon. Trump lost New York, Wilson lost Virginia, Nixon lost California, but they all nevertheless won the presidency. Truman won his home state, Missouri. Okay, number 8. Who was never elected by a final vote of the Electoral College? So Jefferson, Lincoln, Taft, John Quincy Adams, and Ford. This is a somewhat tricky question. Okay, and here the answer is John Quincy Adams and Ford. Adams, for the reason we previously discussed, because his election went to the House. Remember, I said final vote. Ford, because he was made president through a special process and had not been elected president in the traditional way, so no electoral college. And because it says was never elected, Jefferson is not checked off because that would have been true in 1800, but he was reelected in 1804 by the traditional method and hence by the Electoral College. Okay, number 9, and I stop at 10 or with 10. Number 9, if a president dies in office, which of the following are not in the line of succession? President pro tem of the Senate, Secretary of the Treasury, Secretary of Veteran Affairs, Speaker of the House, none of the above. So, which of the following are not in the line of succession upon a death? And the answer is none of the above. The line of succession is governed by the Presidential Succession Act of 1947, which was signed by Truman. And after the vice president comes the speaker, then the president pro tem, and then the cabinet, because it kept getting amended. So you could have, depending on what tragedy ensues, the Secretary of Veteran Affairs, which some of you may have guessed, governing as becoming the next president. Of course, we had a TV show along those lines, didn't we? All right, number 10, my last for the moment. Which president served 2 non-consecutive terms in office? Jackson, Cleveland, McKinley, Franklin Roosevelt. And the answer is Grover Cleveland. Benjamin Harrison was in between his two terms. Harrison was elected in 1888. So Gary, you do 10.
Oh, well, you just did 10. I do number 11.
No, you do 10. You do 10 more.
Oh, yes, right. Okay. What is the maximum number of years a president may serve? 4, 6, 8, 10, or no limit?
Okay.
And the answer to that is 10. The somewhat simplified answer to that is 10. There's an amendment, Guy. What amendment is it?
22nd.
22nd Amendment puts this into effect. It says that the president may serve 2 terms plus a maximum of 2 years having taken over someone else's term. So this was put into effect right around the time that Truman took over from Franklin Roosevelt.
Right. Or if I may add, put differently, the president is limited to 2 elected terms, but if he succeeds to the presidency by virtue of a death or a resignation and serves less than 2 years or less, it does not count as a term. Okay. Gary?
Wait to scroll. Can you scroll down a little bit? Oh, right. Was there ever a time when neither the president nor his vice president had been elected to their respective offices? And if so, who were they? Now think hard. You know this one. Okay, in 1974 through 1977, Gerald Ford was the president and Nelson Rockefeller was the vice president, neither having been elected to the positions. Okay, question number 13. How many times has a president served for a time without a vice president?
So I should add, included in this concept is for part of his term.
Yeah, right.
It doesn't have to be for the full 4 years.
Okay, and the answer to that is 13 times. The president has served without a vice president for a period of time.
Unlucky number.
Number 14. Which of the following served as vice president for more than one president? George Clinton, James Monroe, John Calhoun, Alvin Barkley, or nobody? I'll give you a hint. There are 2 of them. Make it easier for you now.
That also eliminates no one.
George Clinton served under Jefferson and Madison, and John Calhoun served under John Quincy Adams and Jackson. How many vice presidents have later become president for any reason? They succeeded the president, they ran for president later, any reason at all. How many vice presidents later became president? 8, 11, 13, or 15? And the answer is 15. So maybe the vice presidency is worth more than a bucket of warm piss, as was famously said, because 8 of them succeeded the president after the president's death, and 7 more became president by being elected.
or including one resignation.
Right, that's right, resignation, okay.
16.
Number 16, which president was the only lifelong bachelor? And no, there's no evidence he was gay. But he was a lifelong bachelor. And the answer to that is Buchanan, who until recently was considered our worst president ever. Okay, which presidents had postgraduate degrees that were other than law degrees? Wilson, George W. Bush, Teddy Roosevelt, or Eisenhower? These are postgraduate degrees other than law degrees.
Morning, Janet. How are you?
And while you're thinking about it, again, I'll make it a little easier for you. There were two. Woodrow Wilson had a PhD and George W. Bush had an MBA. Okay.
Johns Hopkins and Harvard, respectively.
Okay. Which presidents went on to serve in the legislative or judicial branch after their terms ended? Madison, John Quincy Adams, Andrew Johnson, Lyndon Johnson, and Taft. Again, it was two of these. John Quincy Adams served in Congress after his term ended. I'm sorry, there are three of them. Excuse me. I said two, there are three. Jackson became a senator after the end of his term.
We'll work it out on next week.
And Taft was appointed to the Supreme Court after the end of his term.
Yeah, possible.
Somebody's in the background needs to be muted.
Yeah, because
And that was Andrew Johnson, served as a senator. And I might add, died only a few months, I think 4 to 5 after his term as senator started.
I am too.
Okay.
Same with me, same with me.
Number 19. How many presidents owned at least one slave during their life? 5, 7, 9, or 12?
Yeah. Oh, we could be wherever you want. But 5,000, you know?
Can you mute people, Ilana? Would you mute everyone who's not, it doesn't need to be unmuted?
We'll be about.
Anyway, the answer is 12.
I'm in shape. She's not, and, you know, like.
Ilana, can you mute everybody, please?
Gary, let me add to this one. The last president was Grant, who did own one slave, but prior to the presidency, 8 presidents, 8 of the 12 owned at least one slave, if not more, during their presidencies.
Okay, and the last one in my section here is before January 20th was the date. On what date did the president's term begin? February 28th, March 4th, June 30th, first Monday in March, or none of the above? And the answer to that is March 4th. And of course, if you've been following the news, you know that the QAnon conspiracy believes, or some of the adherents of the QAnon conspiracy believes, that Trump will actually be inaugurated on March 4th because there has been no president after, I think it was Grant or Hayes, considered to be a legitimate president because of one of the amendments to the Constitution. Maybe you know better than I. So that's sort of an interesting one, but it was March 4th.
I would add on this one that the change to January 20 was in the 20th Amendment, and that was, I think, ratified in 1937.
And now I'll turn it.
I have the next 10. Number 21, who is known as His Excellency? And the answer here is Tyler, because he was the first vice president to become president during his term as a result of a death, the death of William Henry Harrison, who was known as, number 22, the Tennessee Tailor. Andrew Johnson, Taylor, spelled differently, Pierce, Monroe, Jackson. And here the answer is Andrew Johnson, A, because he was from Tennessee, and B, because he actually made a living as a tailor before he got into politics. Number 23, who was known as the hero of San Juan Hill, Garfield, Wilson, Teddy Roosevelt, or Jackson. And the answer is Theodore Roosevelt. He had been the leader of the Rough Riders during the Battle of San Juan Hill, which was in the Spanish-American War. The battle was 1898. Okay, number 24, who was known as the schoolmaster, Coolidge, Wilson, Carter, or Lincoln. And the answer is Woodrow Wilson, because he had made a career in education before the presidency. He had been the president of Princeton, for example. Number 25, who was known as Dutch? Van Buren, Benjamin Harrison, Chester Arthur, Ronald Reagan. And the answer is Reagan. His father had given him that nickname, and it stuck, apparently because his father called him a fat little Dutchman based on his look when he was a kid, and also because he had a Dutch boy haircut style. Okay, 26, which president wrote the best golf advice I ever received? Sorry, Trump, Eisenhower, McKinley, Nixon. And the answer is Trump. Whether or not he actually wrote it, we'll leave to other scholars, but that's his book. 27, who wrote Rules of Civility and Decent Behavior in Company and Conversation? Wilson, Jefferson, Washington, or Hoover? And the answer is George Washington. Number 28, who wrote Through the Brazilian Wilderness? Theodore Roosevelt, Taft, Jackson, Franklin Roosevelt. And here the answer is Teddy Roosevelt, not surprisingly, because he was a great traveler and adventurer, both before, probably during, but also after his presidency. Okay, 29. Which president is not on Mount Rushmore? Washington, Lincoln, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. And the answer is Franklin Roosevelt. The fourth president on Rushmore is Jefferson. These were choices that were made by the sculptor Gutzon Borglum at the time based on who he considered representative of significant aspects of the history of the US. And number 30, my last for the moment, what has been the most common occupation for presidents? Farmer, surveyor, lawyer, soldier. The answer is lawyer. Gary?
Okay. Question 31. Who was never elected to public office prior to his presidency? Washington, Lincoln, Hayes, Hoover, Eisenhower. And there are two answers, two correct answers. And the correct ones were Hoover and Eisenhower.
Yeah. Hayes had been a governor. Lincoln was in the House in Illinois and Washington, a variety of things, including the Virginia House of Burgesses.
Okay. Number 32. Which of these presidents never won a Nobel Peace Prize? Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt, Wilson, Carter. So 3 of these did, and 1 of them did not.
You make it easier than I do.
I know, well,
You're a more generous guy,
we knew that.
probably because you're not a lawyer.
Franklin Roosevelt never won a Nobel Peace Prize. That's what happens when you're the president during the war. Next question. 33A. What was the greatest number of children any president had? 6, 9, 12, 15. And the answer to that is 15. So then, of course, you're wondering, moving right on to the next B, part B of this question, well, who was it? Jackson, Tyler, John Adams, or Fillmore? And the answer is Tyler, who didn't really get to do very much else in his presidency.
So Congress must have been in recess 100% of the time.
Yeah. Okay, which president won 3 Grammy Awards? Carter, Reagan, Franklin Roosevelt, Trump. 3 Grammy Awards. And the answer to that is Carter, who won them, I think, for narrating a book or something. Guy, is that right?
Best spoken word album. So something like that. I don't.
Yep.
I don't have the names of the various albums.
Okay. None of them won for singing. Okay. 35. Which president became disabled during his term, and during that time his wife made many presidential decisions? Van Buren, Grant, Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt. And the answer to that is Wilson, who suffered a very severe stroke towards the end of his term. And in those days, presidential health issues were kept very private. And he was really not able to function very well. And his wife, whose name I could give you in a minute,
Edith.
Mrs. Wilson.
Gary, it was Edith Wilson.
Edith was actually making decisions for him, unbeknownst to the majority of the American public.
How did she do?
How did she do?
Yeah,
Well, I guess she must have done all right. But I think I did read that people were starting to resent it because they couldn't even get in to see him. She was very protective of him, wouldn't let people see him at all. And he was in pretty bad shape after a very serious stroke. Okay, number 36. Who was the first president to be photographed while in office? Was that William Henry Harrison, Lincoln, Buchanan, or Tyler? And the answer to that is Harrison. I do believe that there was a president who was photographed earlier than that, in earlier years, but he wasn't yet president. So it was the earliest one to be photographed while in office.
what year was Harrison in?
Harrison was, let me get to my list here. William Henry Harrison was 1841.
That would be very shortly after they invented photography, so.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, number 37A. Who was the first president to ride in a car? Cleveland, McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt, or Taft? The answer to that is McKinley. And I bet you know what part B is. What kind of car was it? It doesn't show here, but I'm going to ask you anyway. What kind of car was it? And I had choices somehow that didn't make it to the list, but that'll be an open-ended question. So write down what you think the car was. Was it like a Model T or a Rio or an Olds or a Stanley or a
Ferrari,
Daimler or
Maserati.
Anyway, McKinley rode in a Stanley steamer. And that was the
Oh.
first car that was ever written in.
That's a local car.
Yeah.
It's, you're right, Jules, and I would add, it may not be local where it was made. I think it may have been made in Maine, but the Stanley brothers lived in Newton Corner.
Yeah,
In fact, I believe they lived within 150 yards of my house. You know,
any parts left
what
over?
little that's worth.
They
Okay.
lived on Franklin Street, right at 2 houses in from center.
Okay, next question. Who was the only president to have served as Speaker of the House? Polk, George H.W. Bush, Madison, or Harding? And the answer to that is Polk.
Okay.
Number 39. Which Speaker of the House failed in frequent attempts to become president? Adlai Stevenson, Daniel Webster, Henry Clay, William Jennings Bryan. It was Henry Clay. And number 40. Who was the heaviest president? Buchanan, Trump, Taft, Harding. And the answer to that is Taft.
Yeah, he's over 300 pounds, I believe.
That may be
Well,
actually
that's-
the next question. And I'll turn it
Next
over to
question.
Guy.
For my next 10. So how much did Taft weigh while he was in office? 244, 289, 304, or 406? When he wasn't serving as a middle linebacker.
No, he was the whole line.
And the answer is an incredible 354 pounds.
Yeah, that's 300 pounds, right? More than 300.
Okay, 42. What is currently the president's annual salary, excluding any count for benefits and allowances, the basic salary? 250,000, 325, 400, or 500?
400?
325.
We have to mute everybody now. Ilana, would you mute people?
Okay. And the answer is $400,000. I'm not sure Trump took that as salary, but in any event, that's what the law says at the moment. Okay, absolute obscurity, 43A. Which president played the banjo? Arthur, Carter, Lyndon Johnson, Jackson, or Reagan?
Everybody should know this one.
That's right. There's extra credit. You'll have a personal visit with us on the questions we don't reach. The answer is Chester Arthur. And if my brother is on the line, he was affectionately known as Chet. That's my brother's name. Okay. Who of the following played the violin? Lincoln, Coolidge, Wilson, Franklin Roosevelt, Obama. I may speed these up because we want to try to reach as many questions as possible. And the answer is Lincoln and Wilson, at least when he wasn't suffering from a stroke.
I've never seen Lincoln photographed with a violin.
Which of the following presidents went to college? Truman, Washington, Monroe, Jackson, none of the above.
If anybody did, you Monroe.
And the answer is only Monroe, who went to the College of William and Mary. Next, what was the age of the youngest president on the date of his inauguration? 39, 42, 46, 49, and we'll combine it with the next one. Who was it? Madison, Obama, Teddy Roosevelt, or John Kennedy? And the answers are Teddy Roosevelt at the age of 42. He was closely followed by John Kennedy at the age of 43. Okay, number 47. Who was the last president who was neither a Democrat nor a Republican? Fillmore, Buchanan, Andrew Johnson, Hayes. And it's Fillmore, who was a Whig, 1850 to 1853. That's because he was a vice president who succeeded by the death.
Did the Whig
president.
Party morph into the one of those two?
I'm sorry, did it? Well, the Whigs had, we'll come to another question well, let's look at the next question first. Who was not a Whig candidate? William Henry Harrison, Tyler, John Quincy Adams, Taylor. Who was not a Whig? And here it's John Quincy Adams. So there was a period of time when the Whigs were a popular alternative. And if memory serves, I could be wrong. I think Lincoln may have been a Whig or enamored with the Whigs earlier in his political career. Okay, 49. Which president killed 2 men prior to entering the office, but not because of any military action? Washington, Andrew Johnson, Jackson, Pierce.
Jackson.
Please stay muted.
You're,
Don't call out the answers, please.
you get 2 demerits for yelling out without permission. And the answer is yes, Andrew Jackson. Okay, next, which vice president shot someone during his term in office? John Calhoun, Aaron Burr, Dick Cheney, Dan Quayle, Thomas Jefferson. This is during his term in office as a vice president. And this goes back to my singular plural observation. There are 2, Aaron Burr and Dick Cheney. Aaron Burr, of course, killed Hamilton in 1804, and Cheney accidentally shot a companion on by accident on a hunting trip in 2006. Didn't kill him, but did shoot him. Gary?
Okay.
50.
Why don't you do this one, guy? I started with mine with 51.
Okay, you're right. Okay. Which president spoke another language before he spoke English? Fillmore, Benjamin Harrison, Hoover, Van Buren. And the answer is Van Buren. This is our second visit to the world of Dutch. He was born, hearkening back to my comment on Reagan, he was born to a Dutch family and as a result spoke Dutch as his first language. Gary?
Okay, I'm going to speed this up a lot because we're definitely running out of time. So which 2 states gave us the most presidents? Mass and Virginia, Ohio and Virginia, New York and Ohio, Mass and New York. So it's one of those choices. The answer is Ohio and Virginia, 7 presidents from Ohio and 8 presidents from Virginia. Next question. What was the first capital of the United States? Philadelphia, Washington, D.C., New York City, Wilmington, Delaware. And the answer to that is New York City.
For roughly 1 year, 1789 to 1790.
Which presidents were shot but not killed while serving or campaigning? Reagan, Benjamin Harrison, McKinley, Teddy Roosevelt. Shot but not killed. And there are 2. And the answers are Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 and Reagan in 1981. Next question. Which president was shot at, resulting in the death of his companion, Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak. Franklin Roosevelt, Taft, McKinley, Harding. And the answer there is Franklin Roosevelt.
And I'll add, this was in 1933. The killer was Giuseppe Zangara, who was executed the same year, which is quite unusual.
Who was almost killed by Squeaky Fromme? Lincoln, Truman, Garfield, Reagan, Ford. Since there was nobody named Squeaky when Lincoln was president, the answer to that is Ford. We all remember that.
And interestingly, she was sentenced to life in prison, but was paroled in 2009 and now lives in New York.
Where she's a pole dancer. No. Okay.
I don't think.
Okay.
He was paid off by Trump.
Okay. Question 56. Who assassinated McKinley? Oswald, Czolgosz, however that's pronounced, Hauptmann, Guiteau, or Princip? One way or another, these are all famous names. And the answer to that is Leon Czolgosz.
Who also died in the electric chair after a fairly short time following conviction.
Okay, number 57. When Kennedy was assassinated, who else was killed by the same man that day? Jack Ruby, David Ferry, John Connally, J.D. Tippit. And the answer to that is J.D. Tippit, who I believe was a Dallas policeman. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah. Number 58. The Baltimore plot of 1861 was a conspiracy to do what? Assassinate Lincoln, deliver U.S. Army secrets to the Confederates, blow up Fort McHenry, or poison the Baltimore city water supply. The Baltimore plot of 1861. And the answer was, it was a plot to assassinate Lincoln when he was on his way to his inauguration, passing through Baltimore on his way to be inaugurated in DC. And there's a long story behind it, but in service of getting more questions answered, we'll move on and talk more about it at the end if we have time, because this was quite interesting. Number 59, which presidents died on the very same day? Adams and Jefferson, Grant and Buchanan, Hayes and Cleveland, Truman and Hoover. And the answer to that is Adams and Jefferson. And I believe, unless it's apocryphal, that it was on the 4th of July. Is that right?
Yeah, this is fascinating. It was the 4th of July, 1826. And what's absolutely amazing was that John Monroe died on July 4th as well, 1831. They were the only presidents to die on July 4th, and all of them were among the founding fathers. Incredible.
And question 60, after which I'll turn it over to Guy. Which presidential candidate died 24 days after Election Day and still got electoral votes when they were officially counted? William Henry Harrison, Horace Greeley, William Jennings Bryan, Stephen Douglas. And it was Horace Greeley, who was on the ballot and still got electoral votes. Okay, Guy.
Well, and I'll add, technically, that's a yes and no. This was the election of 1872. Most of his electoral votes went to others because he was deceased at the time the votes were cast, but he did get several, and then they were officially rejected because he was ineligible to become president, obviously because he was dead. Okay, 61. Who was the first president to have a beard? Lincoln, Grant, John Quincy Adams, Millard Fillmore. And the answer is Lincoln. 62. Which president was unanimously elected in the Electoral College? Jackson, Washington, Nixon, none of the above. And the answer is Washington, who, not surprisingly, did it twice. Next, which president is enshrined in a sports hall of fame? Jefferson, Lincoln, Kennedy, George W. Bush. And combined with the next one, which sport? Football, baseball, wrestling, or sailing? And the answer is Lincoln, who was recognized by the Wrestling Hall of Fame and is reputed to have had a 299 wins and 1 loss record in competitive wrestling. Next, which president was good enough to play his sport professionally? Teddy Roosevelt, Eisenhower, Obama, Ford. And combined with the next one, what sport? Basketball, football, baseball, tennis. And the answer is Gerald Ford, who was a center at the University of Michigan. He was good enough to have received an offer to play for the Packers and the Lions, but elected to go to law school instead. 65A, which president played for his college baseball team as they won 2 college World Series? George H.W. Bush, Ford, Biden, Kennedy. And we'll combine it with the next one. What college? Harvard, Yale, University of Texas, UCLA. And the answer is George H.W. Bush, who was a first baseman for Yale. And I read that he kept his college glove in his desk in the Oval Office throughout his term. It's just something that he was sentimental about. Okay, 65C. Which president at any time in his life finished an official marathon? Obama, Clinton, George W. Bush, Franklin Roosevelt. And the answer here is Bush, who ran in the Houston Marathon and finished it in 1993 at the age of 46. 66. Which one of these was not related to another president? John Adams, Benjamin Harrison, Teddy Roosevelt, Robert Taft, George H.W. Bush. Not related. And it's Robert Taft. Unlike the others, Roosevelt was not related to, well, I'll pass that comment. 67. Which of these failed presidential candidates was a grandson of a vice president? Thomas Dewey, Adlai Stevenson, Samuel Tilden, William Jennings Bryan, Charles Evans Hughes. All ran for president. One of them had a grandfather who was vice president. And it's Adlai Stevenson, whose grandfather was Adlai E. Stevenson, who was vice president under Cleveland during his second term. Okay, 68. Which vice president resigned while in office? Elbridge Gerry, John Calhoun, Schuyler Colfax, Thomas Marshall, Spiro Agnew. And it's two of them. Calhoun resigned when he was serving under Jackson, and Agnew resigned while serving under Nixon. 69. What is Harry S. Truman's real middle name? Simpson, Schuyler, Sherman, S. No middle name. And the answer is just S. And number, Gary, do I get 70 or do you?
You get 70.
Okay. What was President Grant's real middle
Hold on, Guy. The reason that Harry S. Truman's middle name was S is that his mother was trying to choose between two middle names, both of which began with S, couldn't make up her mind, so just pick the letter S for his middle name. Okay, going on.
Okay, so what was President Grant's real middle name? Popularly, he was called Ulysses S. Grant, but just put that to the side. What was his real middle name? Scott, Ulysses, Solomon, S. No middle name. And here the answer, which you probably would not have known, is Ulysses, because he was born Hiram Ulysses Grant. And an error was made in a supporting letter for his application to West Point when he was listed with the middle initial S, because the family name on his mother's side was Simpson. And so he wound up with Ulysses S. Grant, but he was actually Hiram Ulysses. Gary?
Okay, question number 71. Which two of these presidents are not buried in either DC or Arlington, Virginia? Teddy Roosevelt, Wilson, Taft, Lincoln, Kennedy. Now, Guy, for some reason, I only wrote one of these down. I have Teddy Roosevelt is one. And
Well,
who's
you give your answer and I'll add.
Yeah, I have Teddy Roosevelt, but there's a second one.
And the not buried, and the other is Lincoln, who's buried in Illinois.
Right. Okay. Okay, 72. Who served the shortest time in a given term? Ford, Garfield, William Henry Harrison, Kennedy. The answer to that is Harrison, who died just about a month after his inauguration. He got sick right after his inauguration, was never healthy, and died, I think, 31 days later. Number 73. Which three of these presidents got married while in office? Jackson, Tyler, Cleveland, Teddy Roosevelt, Wilson, Harding. And there are three of them: Tyler, Cleveland and Wilson. 74. Which president gave the first radio address to the nation? McKinley, Wilson, Coolidge, Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin Roosevelt. First radio address to the nation. And it was Woodrow Wilson. 75. Which one of these presidents did not serve in some war-related capacity during both world wars? That's a convoluted question. It's saying that 3 of these presidents served in World War I and World War II in some capacity relating to the war, but one of them did not. And the one who did not was Hoover. We can, if we have time later, we can tell you what the others did, but I'd rather go on to the next question. Which of these presidents got divorced? Fillmore, Reagan, Trump, Hayes, Harding. And I'm sure that most of us could remember that until Ronald Reagan was elected president, it was believed that you couldn't possibly get elected president if you were divorced. And Reagan got elected, and of course, we know Trump was divorced a couple of times. So those are the 2, Reagan and Trump. 77. And this is a 2-part question you can scroll to. Who was the shortest president? And of course, who was the tallest? The shortest choices are John Adams, Truman, Madison, Carter, and the tallest, Washington, Lincoln, Trump, Ford. The shortest president was James Madison at 5'4".
Yes.
And the tallest president, and he did this without wearing platform shoes, was Lincoln at 6'4". And I think the tallest Trump ever got with his platform shoes was about 6'2". 78. Who was the first president who was not a British subject when he was born? Monroe, Taylor, Van Buren, Jackson. Was not a British subject when he was born. And that would be Van Buren. Number,
Who was born in 1782, a few years after the ratification of the Constitution.
79. Which of these presidents were Catholic? Taft, Kennedy, Reagan, Biden, Ford. And I think we can also all remember back to when, just like a divorced person, a Catholic could never become elected president. And then Kennedy became president, and then Biden. So we've had 2 Catholic presidents.
And actually, Gary, to add to that, quite surprisingly, you've got basically Catholics and Jews on the Supreme Court, which you think about it is quite striking.
Yeah. And number 80, who ran for president the most times? Eugene Debs, Harold Stassen, Ralph Nader, William Jennings Bryan. These are 4 fascinating characters in American history. And the winner is Harold Stassen. And I can't remember, was it 8 or 9 times, Guy? He ran.
Yeah, I checked this last night. He ran 9 times, amazingly, ranging from 1944 to 1992. Unbelievable.
And it's on you, Guy.
I go. Okay, 81. Who was the first president born outside the 13 original states? Buchanan, Lincoln, Grant, Andrew Johnson. And it's Lincoln, who was born in Kentucky. 82, who was the first woman to run for president nominated by any party? Shirley Chisholm, Victoria Woodhull, Hillary Clinton, Susan B. Anthony. And it's Victoria Woodhull, who was nominated by the Equal Rights Party in 1872, and Frederick Douglass was her nominated vice president, although there's some question about how much he cooperated in that effort. He was kind of drafted, if I recall my reading. 83, who was the only president buried in Iowa? Hoover, Harding, Benjamin Harrison, Hayes. A question you obviously were burning to know the answer to. And it's Hoover, who was born in Iowa. Okay, 84. Along with Alexander Hamilton and John Jay, which later president authored the Federalist Papers? John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe. And there were three of them that together authored the Federalist Papers, and the third was James Madison, also generally considered the author loosely of the Constitution. 85, who was a leading general in the Mexican War, or Mexican-American War? Tyler, Van Buren, Taylor, Buchanan. And the answer is Taylor, who was a brigadier. I'm doing well with my speech here. Brigadier general during that war. 86, who wrote a famous autobiography finishing on the eve of his death? Truman, Grant, Teddy Roosevelt, Wilson, Jackson. And the answer is Grant, who wrote the personal memoirs of U.S. Grant. He died 5 days after he finished. And Samuel Clemens was his editor and publisher. 87, who had been a trade union official at some point prior to the presidency? Reagan, Truman, Lyndon Johnson, Cleveland, George W. Bush. And the answer is Reagan, who had been president of the Screen Actors Guild. 88, who first had to deal with arguments for state nullification of federal laws? Which president had to deal with this? Lincoln, Fillmore, Pierce, Jackson. And the answer is Andrew Jackson. Nullification was a big issue that his vice president, John Calhoun of South Carolina, favored, and that was one of the reasons Calhoun quit the vice presidency. 89, who presided over the acquisition, basically, of the West Coast or western part of the US? Jefferson, Monroe, Fillmore, Polk. And the answer is President Polk, who was president during Texas's admission to the Union, the Mexican-American War, the annexation of Oregon. He's one of the few presidents who made a pledge that was huge and fulfilled it in this fashion. Okay, number 90. Which presidents won elections in part? This is a thoughtful question, a little tricky. In part, due to the actions of one or more justices of the Supreme Court regarding electoral college issues. Lyndon Johnson, Hayes, George W. Bush, Trump, Teddy Roosevelt, Joe Biden. The words of this question are important, in part due to the actions of one or more. And the answer consists of three of them: Hayes, Bush, and Biden. Hayes, because certain justices were on an electoral commission that determined the qualifications of votes from several states where the electoral votes were in dispute. But that was not the Supreme Court acting as such, but it did have certain justices. Bush, of course, in 2000, in the case of Bush v. Gore, and Biden, because of the Supreme Court's denial of taking jurisdiction in the challenge of the state of Texas versus the state of Pennsylvania, dealing with the legitimacy of electoral votes. Gary?
Okay, now we have very little time left. We're going
Time is
10 more,
obviously very short.
and then we'll be finished. We may not have time for questions. Guy, would you rather take questions now and not do the rest, or do 10 more questions? I think maybe it'd be good to let people ask questions and participate a little bit in the few minutes we have left.
All right, Alana, why don't you?
Questions, no more questions.
Alana, why don't you unmute everyone? If anyone has comments, questions, believe it or not, we were up to close to 150 questions. So maybe we'll consider doing this on a subsequent, finishing it off on a subsequent
Okay,
session.
Sure.
Any questions, comments?
Yeah, I have one, Guy.
Shoot.
I don't necessarily believe there's dispute as to whether the assassinator was shooting at Roosevelt or Cermak. It's not necessarily a given any longer that it was clearly an attempt at Roosevelt. There are some people with credible positions that he was trying to get Cermak.
Well, I suppose that's an interesting observation. I suppose if the question is which president was shot at, given how close they were in the car,
Yeah,
might qualify either way.
yeah, but the way you wrote it, you said
I didn't realize that. I always thought it was Roosevelt that was the target, and
he may have been. I'm not saying it is indisputable. I'm saying there are good views on both sides.
No, understood.
All right, so we could reword the question for the next time we give it.
Right.
Anybody else?
Guy, I've got a question. Your answer to what I think was a question about not being related was Robert Taft. Didn't you mean William Howard Taft?
Yes. Yes.
No, it was which of the following was not related to a president.
Oh, right. There we go. You're right.
Question. So all of those were related to another president. Like Benjamin Harrison was there; he was related to William Henry Harrison.
Right, but everyone else became
Taft.
president.
But Robert Taft was not related to William Howard Taft.
Okay, so but William Howard Taft would have been an answer because he wasn't related to any other president.
for those who don't know, Stephen Korn's a lawyer, and he's torturing us as always. We stop in 5 or 6 minutes. Any other
I have a piece,
Yes,
observations, challenges?
I have a piece of,
things to say?
I have a piece of ephemera, if you can see it, and my question would be, which election did this come from?
That's
Which
Taft and,
Right.
it's Taft on the right, I think, or is that Teddy?
So the question is, which one was going to be elected in this election?
Who's on the left? It's hard for me to see.
I think it's Taft on the right.
Yes.
So who was Taft running against in this year?
So that would have been 1908.
Yep.
Teddy Roosevelt.
Was it Bryan?
William Jennings Bryan, you are right.
Okay,
A guy.
shoot.
Yeah, I did have a nit on your question about the presidents that serve non-consecutive terms. Wouldn't FDR be considered one of them?
No.
He served 32 to 36, and he served 40 to 44. Those are non-consecutive.
No, his terms were all consecutive.
No, but he served two of the, but obviously if the non-consecutive, two of them were non-consecutive. The 30 to 32 to 36 was one term. Another term was 40 to 44.
Oh.
Those are non-consecutive terms.
All right, so we have to read.
If you are not officially a member of the bar, you've been officially made one. You will be charged dues by the BBO of roughly $350 per year. Any others?
Before you dismiss it, like just a 1 minute, what's a plea? I want to plead. So when you're ready, just tell me and I'll do it. And
You probably should do it now because we only have about 2
okay. I want to thank you for your hard work on this, and we're still looking for speakers. Okay. And so if anybody knows somebody, or if you've got something in the can, or wish to talk, please make note of it and contact me. Okay. Now next month we got Jonathan Seidman, who is the husband of our young lady up here, who's Atlanta, and it's going to be the famous software failures in history. That should be an interesting one. So thank you very much again.
Jules, could I just add something?
Basis.
Could I just add something to what Jules just said? I was always, every week that I open the Newton tab, I see the whole front page is, all the articles are written by somebody named Julie Cohen. So I thought maybe she'd be an interesting guest. She could probably tell a lot of stories.
Julie Cohen, and in which
The
tab?
Newton tab, there's a minimum of 3 articles written every week by her. She covers the whole front page.
Okay.
So
Have you got a scanner at home?
That's a good idea. I think in light of the hour, lest we be cut off because we're followed by something else for the Newton Senior Center, I think we should say goodbye. Thank you to Alana.
Thank you, Alana.
Gary. Thank you everyone for staying and participating. And hope you learned something and had fun.
Thank you, Guy and Gary. I'm not a politics person, but that was really, really, really interesting.
Great.
Really interesting. You did a fantastic job with that.
Thank you.
Thank you so
Thanks
much.
for your help, Alana.
Bye all. Stay safe.
Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
So long.